All right, no, I am Adam Felber, and I do want to start off by saying this is a real treat for me because I've been reading you for years. There are not a ton of groupies of public intellectual men of science, but
I noticed.
I am one of them. And
it's always guys.
I'm sorry, but I've been collecting for a while. I've hung out with Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins. I was trained by Dan Dennett. I had the honor of watching Christopher Hitchens guzzle down more whiskey than one should backstage at Bill Maher, and then go on to be the most lucid person on the stage. And now I feel like my set's complete by getting to talk to you. Michael Shermer, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
It really does complete the set. Am I missing anybody?
No, well, before that was sort of Gould and Sagan were kind of my mentors.
Stephen Gould, sure.
So if there is an Afterlife, I'm hoping they'll be there. Hitch, Sagan, it'll be great.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic.
So, I mean, if that's hell, that's perfectly okay. Hitch said, one of the quotes I use from Hitch is that, if the Christian heaven is like you're at the party, and then you're tapped on the shoulder and told you have to leave the party, but worse, the party's going to go on without you. But if you're going to what essentially the Christian heaven would be like celestial North Korea, he called it.
Right.
Because really it's like a dictator that knows everything you're thinking. It's like, ooh, that does not sound like a good idea.
Right, he doesn't bring you presents either, so it's worse than Santa.
Or worse, he said, you're at the party, you're tapped on the shoulder and told you can never leave. That's even worse.
Yeah.
Because eternity, everything will get boring if it goes on forever, especially toward the end.
I believe there's a Talking Heads song called Heaven that says the exact same thing.
Is that right?
Yes.
Is that where that came from?
Beautiful, cynical little song that says heaven is a place where nothing ever happens.
That's right. It would be boring.
Verse by verse, it becomes evident how boring that is.
No, and I was a Christian in college. I went to Pepperdine.
That's right. So you were for real.
I was into it, yeah. So, but before I went to a community college to get my GE out of the way, and I had a professor there who I was evangelizing to. That's what you do when you're an evangelist. You tell people about the good news, the gospel, and so and you give the old promise of the afterlife and all that stuff.
Sure.
And he wanted to know if there were golf courses and tennis courts in heaven. I'm like, gee, I don't really know. There's nothing in the Gospels about that. But basically...
But there would have to be.
There'd have to be something to do, or else you're bored.
Yeah, but everybody would be as good as they want to be at everything, right?
There's
just so many holes in this.
There's so many holes. I mean, it just goes on and on. That's why I quote from my friend Julia Sweeney's great monologue, Letting Go of God, if you've ever seen that. It's online and brilliantly produced.
It's fantastic.
Where she talks about the Mormon boys coming to her door, giving him the pitch to join their, and in heaven, the blind shall see and the deaf shall hear, and everything's made perfect again. And so she said, well, I had my uterus out because I had uterine cancer, so if I go to heaven, do I get my uterus back? And they're like, yeah. She goes, I don't want it back. And then she said, and if you had a nose job, what if you liked it? And I don't want my old nose back. Okay,
that's hilarious.
And that's just the light part. I mean, really, if you're so there's great debates about this in Christian circles. What actually goes to heaven? Is it your whole body and soul, or is it just the soul? So before Descartes split the Western intellectual tradition into dualism, it was your body is going. Right. Right out of the grave.
Because there was no separate soul.
Right.
Right.
So, so the question is, well, how old are you? There you are sitting next to Jesus. How old are you?
Do you get to choose?
Yeah. Well, they decided 30. Because
that's not bad.
It's a good year. It was a good year.
You know what? I had back surgery when I was 30. I'm not kidding. It would have been a terrible year for me.
Yes, not good. Not good. Well, and they had something about Jesus that's when he was crucified. He was 30 or 33 or whatever.
Or something,
33, yeah. So early 30s. And then I started thinking about that. But I'm 63 now. So where do all the memories of my life for the last 33 years, where do they go? Well, you get all those memories.
You get those.
Yeah, but how do you get those?
Like expansion packs.
Yeah, that's right. It's it's bundled. Well, the problem is that the memories I have now when I was 30 are very different than they were, say, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
And the way you remember the earlier memories are different.
They always change, and the context of what it was then that I didn't even know. Oh, I went to this school, or I dated this person, or I married that person, and these were either good or bad things, mostly bad. Anyway, but that's another book.
Right.
This is why I can't believe anybody would write a memoir before they're like 70. I mean, you don't really know what the consequences are of your early life decisions until it plays out.
That's why people end up writing second and third memoirs, because it's all like,
that's right.
oh, here's what I meant to say.
That's right, yeah. That thing I did when I was 25, I now see what that
was not as cool as I thought it was.
Right. So it's not at all clear how it would be that if God gave you all that, it implies there's a fixed entity that's you. So this is the problem of identity, and I'm sure Dan Dennett. He was your professor?
Yes,
That's incredible.
It was the greatest thing.
Dan will go down as one of the greatest philosophers, in my opinion, of all time.
You tweeted about him the other day. You put him in the same tweet as Hume, which is amazing to me. Yeah. And
he didn't mind.
Oh, I'm sure he didn't. Did he write you about it?
Dan is not a modest man.
He is not.
But that's okay.
But he would hate to hear this, but I consider him my intellectual mentor.
Okay.
He'd be ashamed, deeply ashamed, given what my career has been. But he is wonderful.
No.
Yeah.
Anyway, but so if there's no really fixed you that's you.
Right.
There's just this sort of set of characteristics and memories that are, in flux, constantly through your whole life. And so it's not at all clear, not only for the religionists, but the core of my book, the scientists that want to copy your connectome, essentially all your memories, and upload it.
Connectome.
Yeah, your connectome. It's like the genome.
When I was reading it, I read it as Connect to Me.
Yes.
I thought it sounded like a great name for an app.
That's it. That is good. Connect to Me. Yes. All right. You might have
it's
something
spelled like that, right?
You might have something like that.
Okay, Connectome. I'm sorry. Go on.
Yeah. So if they copied your connectome and put it into a computer, first of all, this can't be done at the moment. But just sci-fi, 100 years from now, imagine
a machine powerful enough to take a perfect snapshot of you, including all of the electrochemical impulses in your head at that moment.
Right.
Kabam.
Right. So first of all, the file would be so large, it would be more than all the computers we have now. All right. So their answer to that is, well, Moore's law. It's going to keep going, and we'll get there eventually. Okay, fine.
Moore's law is the then a miracle
answer for
happens.
everything. Those scientists will figure something out.
Right.
It's like the three scientists on the island with cans that they can't open, and the economist finally says, well, imagine we have a can opener. Okay. and that's kind of what you
it's called
hit
the dismal
with
science for a reason.
That's right. So imagine we can copy your connectome and upload it. Okay, so but again, it's a snapshot of you at just that moment.
Right.
And so that's why I opened that chapter with that Star Trek episode where Riker is accidentally duplicated in the transporter.
Sure.
And then that led me into this whole weird world of Trekkies who debate what the transporter actually does, like it's a real thing. Does it copy and paste you and move you, or does it reassemble the atoms on the other side?
The problem with the transporter is that it does seem to be a kind of thing where it could easily accidentally make a couple of you.
Right. So in that episode, Riker's now on the Enterprise, and he's had this relationship with Counselor Troy, and then he runs into himself from 20 years ago, but they're the same, they look the same, and so on. But they've diverged. So the moment a copy is made, you start living different lives.
Right.
And so that's not you.
Right.
And
but you point out that if you were to have a connectomy of you made, and there's another Michael, the computerized Michael.
Right.
Right. Now, and the computerized one can live until they make another one, and then another one, and another one. But so to you, that's not you.
That's right.
But to the one 150 years from now who's been through 3 different versions, that's all him, right?
That's right. That's all him, which is a different me, different Michael Shermer.
But he remembers your first memories.
That's right.
All those mistakes at 25.
That's right. He hopefully learned from him. But again,
but it's not you.
It's not me.
Right.
No. So now the current technology is that this is done with rabbit brains. So they take the rabbit and they freeze the brain. The way they do this so it's not destroyed is, I went and visited a lab that did this, is they anesthetize the rabbit so it's lying there on the little surgery table, and they put these tubes through its carotid arteries, and then they pump an antifreeze into the brain, because the only way to infuse the brain with enough antifreeze to keep it from
fast
being destroyed,
enough, too, yeah.
Fast enough.
Right.
They do this, and then they, and
all these rabbits are volunteers.
Yes. I'm sitting there watching this,
Star
going,
Trek fans.
So you're going to wake him up later? And they go, no, he's dead. I said, how is this helping us get to immortality? He's dead. Yeah. Then we're going to freeze the brain and defrost it tomorrow. But
it's proof of concept to them,
proof
right?
of concept, right?
Much
so
like
slice
Ted
it up.
Williams.
Yes,
we're
he's
never going to wake him up.
No, well, he's ahead.
Yeah.
He's in. He's
ahead of us. Yes.
He's in Arizona.
Yes, he is.
Yes, presumably 1,000 years from now, baseball will still be a thing. And
you wake up to, that's another thing. I do want to go through your book a little more systematically, but that's another thing that strikes me is that when you get to that bit about people who want to create who believe in, what was that thing? Omega point. This is kind of the scientific approach to being immortal. The Omega point is that at some point later in the universe, we'll have enough robust enough technology to bring back everybody in the world, right?
Yeah, this is Frank Tipler's idea. The Physics of Immortality is his book, and that. So again, it's sort of like we copy you, but life is so much more than just you. You know, it's you and me, and you and everybody in the room, and all your relationships, and so you have to recreate everything. Okay, now that's a really big file,
right?
And even the Enterprise doesn't have a big, Okay, so Frank's theory is that in the far future, when the universe starts to collapse, which it's not going to do, so there goes his theory.
It's just going to diffuse, isn't it?
It's just going to diffuse.
It doesn't spring back.
No.
Okay.
Well, not at the moment anyway. So he's hoping that science will change. But the idea is when it collapses, somehow you wave your hand and that produces more energy, enough energy to have this virtual reality in which everyone, not only everyone who ever lived, but whoever could have lived, is reconstructed. And so there's a bunch of people almost just like you, very close to you.
And I have two questions that immediately come to mind. One is, we were just talking about different versions of you. Which comes back at the Omega point? 25-year-old you?
All of them.
All of them?
All of them.
So you have to hang out in a house with all of you.
And every one of them thinks they're you, and so their point of view. So there's two types of selves in this discussion. The memory self, mem self, which is a copy of all your memories.
Sure.
And we just realized that's actually not you.
Can't possibly, yeah.
And then there's the point of view self, POV self, which is you looking out through your eyes at the world. So you go to sleep tonight, you wake up tomorrow, and you're groggy a little bit, but comes back. Or we put you under general anesthesia, you come back 5 hours later, whatever. And
that's your POV snapping back. In his mind, that's what that is. Okay.
So I think these guys have a flawed theory of identity, that if we copy you and put you in a computer, like Johnny Depp in Transcendence, they turn it on, and he's in there. He's looking out through the little camera hole going, here I am. And his body is dead because he was poisoned or whatever. So, but I don't see how, let's say we did it with a super fancy fMRI brain scanner, while you're still awake and alive, and you're still standing there when we've done copying your connectome and we put it into a computer, your point of view doesn't suddenly leap into the computer and,
no, it does not.
And it's a zombie just standing there. No, you're still standing there going, that's not me. I'm right here.
Right, but the guy in the computer's going, well, that's me.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't know who that fraud is,
so,
but I knew I had more hair than him. And the other question about the Omega point that I have is that given when it gets to the end of the universe, who would possibly want everybody back?
So you get Hitler back, and every
you get an infinite number of Hitlers
that's
back.
Right. Yeah.
They're living in a house at the end of the row street.
Right. Yes.
I mean, right now, how many people who have lived and passed on would you personally bring back?
3.
3.
And they're still alive, so I don't,
Right, exactly. So, all right. So, your book is called Heavens on Earth, and it says the scientific search for the afterlife, immortality, and utopia. And you go through that pretty methodically, although there is, spoiler alert, sort of a fourth heaven at the end in your final chapter, which is it's a wonderful book. Let's start with the afterlife because we already touched on it. And what I want to start with is your peculiar relationship with Deepak Chopra.
Yep.
Now, you just did an event with him in New York, right?
Yep.
You are intellectual antagonists, but now friendly intellectual antagonists.
Yeah, just, I've known him for a quarter century now. We put him on the cover of Skeptic and he hammered him pretty hard for his woo-woo. And, and Sam Harris and I debated him and a woman named Jean Houston at Caltech, and, that was epic. Deepak uses language that just sounds nonsensical, which elicits this, that's woo-woo.
Right.
So a long series of conversations led to him inviting my wife and I to come down to his center in Carlsbad, the Chopra Center, appropriately named. And it's at this posh resort, like the Four Seasons or something, with a golf course. Anyway, so I thought, all right, let's do it. I mean, he offered me a free stay at this resort. Okay, we'll do it.
Yeah. No, I would do it.
Yeah.
Deepak, if you're watching this on the internet.
he'd like his invitation. And it was
an
great.
Agreeable skeptical person.
We did the whole, you get the massages and the yoga and the meditation and the tea and the food. And it's like, you'll feel better. Yeah, of course. If you go to a 4-star resort on a beach in California, how could you not feel better? I
right.
mean, you're doing something wrong if you don't feel.
But it could have been a nihilist resort, and you'd still feel better.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely, totally. But really, what I wanted to do was just get into his world. Like when he says that consciousness is the womb of creation, and people just swoon when he says this stuff. It's just unbelievable. Like, what the hell are you talking about?
Consciousness is the womb of creation.
Or it's the ontological primitive. Whoa.
Now, I know what both ontological and primitive
That's right, yeah. Or it's the, what's the other one? It's the ground of all being.
Ooh.
Well, he got that from Tillich, who's a theologian who described God as the ground of all being. Okay, what does this mean? Well, essentially,
him, consciousness is God, right? I mean, that's the thing
right.
with him.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. There, when we think of God as this person or heaven as a place to go, this is completely mistaken. This isn't just Deepak. This is his is kind of a Western version of Hinduism, Buddhism blend.
Sure.
Little Taoism. Just throw a little all that in there,
Sprinkle
mix it up, and take it to California, and you got a new religion.
Put it on a resort.
Yeah, and so I kind of when you see his tweets, he pours these tweets out. Now there's an app you can get that generates tweets. Two of them. It generates tweets one after another, and you have to decide if it's completely made up, but by randomly stringing together words and phrases.
Oh, it's specifically Deepak Chopra.
Yeah, it's a Deepak Chopra. Well, it's not his app. Somebody it makes fun of him.
Yes.
I think he's amused by it. But basically, it's then you push the button whether it's real Deepak or the fake Deepak, and you can't tell the difference.
Oh.
You really can't. I mean, and I know who he is, what he says, and I can't tell the difference.
Wow.
I don't think he could. I don't think he could tell the difference.
That would be fun to do, to give him that app and see if he could do it.
Because the way all we have is our thoughts, and then we use words to describe what it is we're thinking as best we can.
Sure.
And it's not you have to understand what I mean by these words and vice versa, or else we're not communicating. So this is what I try to do with Deepak. Just what do you mean when you say this? And try to bore down into the differences in our worldviews, and the differences are just core. Consciousness is everything, and all physical matter is just a temporary sort of instantiation of this consciousness for a while. So when you die, you don't go anywhere. You just return to where you were before you were born.
Because you've been there all along, and this is just
that's right.
Your body is the vehicle for you at this moment.
That's right. So they feel the whole Christian, Jewish, Islamic traditions of as a place to go.
Right.
This is completely off base. You're not going any place.
Right. He used some sort of television set analogy that you talk about in the book.
Yeah. So again, it's like watching a documentary on string theory. That inevitably a violin comes out. It's like, okay, it's nothing like violins. But they're just trying to do some metaphor to get you from here to there. And so the analogy is, that yes, of course, you need a brain to be conscious in the same way you need a TV set to pick up the signals coming into the room. To which I say, yeah, but we know that there are television networks broadcasting the signals.
Right.
What's the equivalent of that for consciousness? So they don't really have an answer to that.
There is no answer to that. But he did write you a really nice blurb for your book,
He did, yes.
May I read it?
Yeah, okay.
I appreciate every evolutionary step skepticism takes towards openness. Heavens on Earth is an affirmation that other worldviews deserve respect and understanding. In this book, science may actually be catching up with the world's wisdom traditions.
Well, that's what
kind of a little backhanded there at the end.
That's what he hopes. That's what he hopes.
We're catching up. Rationalists are catching up. We'll get there, and we don't have to be riding a raft of perfume-scented garbage to get there.
I'm also trying to reach new people, that we're not, us atheist skeptics are not just preaching to the choir, we're not just talking to the same old people.
Sure, and I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and Deepak has this huge audience, just gigantic. He's way bigger than, say, Dawkins' audience.
And he's not a charlatan. You're very clear about this. He's a man who believes what he's saying.
And I know this because every time I see him privately, dinner, lunch, whatever, just email, talking on the phone, he's always working on me. Sure, but did you see this new article that was published in Nature showing that the quantum effects happen at the macro level in plants? Whoa, what? So he's trying to bring me around. There's nothing to be gained from this for him. No. He just wants to.
In fact, there's something to be lost because your debates, produce something for both of you. So
right. And people really do. They seem to benefit from it. So
That's right. Meditation. You cite some studies that meditation it's better than a vacation.
Yeah, and this is just not just Deepak stuff. Like Bob Wright has a new book out, Why Buddhism is True. Dan Harris, the ABC correspondent that hosted that debate that we did with Sam Harris and me and Deepak, he has a book out about meditation to quell your anxiety, sort of thought flooding and anxiety and so on. There's tons of research on this now. But so it's an interesting problem when we say, well, something works, like meditation works.
Sure.
Okay, what does that mean? If I say it works for me,
right,
that's one kind of level of truth. But what scientists want to know, does it really work?
Right.
Not
statistically, will it work for
67% of the people that try 5 minutes a day or whatever?
Yeah.
And that's what his goal is, to work toward that, to show, look, these Eastern wisdom traditions, this is not just bullshit. This is stuff that's actually measurable. It changes your genetic expressions or whatever anyway.
Sure, but it also doesn't presuppose that the practice is somehow inextricably linked to the philosophy, which it is not.
Well, for him it is. Fortunately, he told me you don't have to believe it for it to work. It's like, good, because I don't. But can I still get the massages? Because they really are
They were
nice,
really good?
Yeah. This one I had, this woman was dripping this oil on my forehead, because this is, your third eye is here. So you have these chakras, the crown chakra, throat chakra, heart chakra, solar plexus chakra.
I had a girlfriend who gave me crystal healings, I know.
Yes?
Yep.
Well,
I
so
know exactly where those
focus
crystals go, yep.
Oh, she actually put them?
Oh, yeah, no, actual crystals on my head and everywhere else. Everywhere the chakras were. But go on, I'm sorry.
Did you still get laid?
I did, in fact.
See, it works. That's what I mean. No, but if you think of it, so like in science, we want more than just like this analogy I use that,
right.
I say dark chocolate is superior to milk chocolate, and you say no, it's the opposite.
Okay.
Okay, that's my personal truth. I can't really prove that.
No.
Or Stairway to Heaven is the greatest rock song of all time, and you say no, Freebird is the greatest rock song.
Wow. No,
Freebird is good, but it's not as good. How would you prove that? Okay, so you can't. But by definition, certain truths are just personal, and therefore mystical, and therefore out of the realm of science.
Sure.
But so what we want to do is slide away from that. So like for example, at the moment I have an invitation to go to this place in Costa Rica called Rhythmia, where they do ayahuasca for a week. This person, Graham Hancock, who I did the Joe Rogan show with, who's totally into all this wild stuff, and he's certain that he could bring me around to realize that the drugs open up a door to this other.
That's an incredibly powerful hallucinogen, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Where they have to strap you to a tree to make sure you don't.
Well, the bad part about it is that you spend half the week throwing up, which does not appeal to me at all.
No, I have a friend who did it, so yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right. Well, so the question is well, what if? How do you tell the difference between just my personal experience, in which I say, wow, it was incredible, the colors were rich, and I felt love, and so on, and the person who takes ecstasy and says the colors were rich, and so on, or the person that meditates, or the person that has a near-death experience.
Right.
So if you can't tell the difference, then how do we know which is the real one?
And what's making that experience happen, therefore?
That's right.
And let's talk about near-death experiences and reincarnation, because those are both ways of prolonging life, or afterlife, right?
Well, this is the idea
that proving
that we do have evidence in the form of near-death experiences, reincarnation, and these anomalous psychological experiences. So I deal with those in those chapters. And so anyway, scientists and skeptics, we've looked at this for a long time. So the problem with NDEs, for example, is like what I just said. How can you tell that? Like even Alexander wrote this book, Proof of Heaven, and he describes what heaven is like. Rich colors, bright, intense, like nothing I've ever seen, and I felt just incredible love. Okay, and then I quote from the opening pages of Sam Harris's book, Waking Up, and Oliver Sacks's memoirs, both of which describe them dropping various kinds of hallucinogens.
Right.
In which they say, colors were incredible, I felt so much love. How's an outsider to tell the difference between the one and the other?
Yeah, and what was behind those experiences. You also talk about an experience you had. I love this anecdote. I don't remember what your personal name for it was, but it was the spooky radio.
Oh, the spooky radio, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, should I tell that story?
You could. Does anybody know the spooky radio?
No,
okay.
No, okay. Well, so
gather round, kids. Can we get a flashlight under him?
Yeah. Okay. Hang on. No, so I do put this in there just to kind of show that even us hardcore materialist skeptics can have weird things happen to us.
Right.
So I've written before about my weird alien abduction experience. When I went sleep deprived for days on end, but this particular one. Well, anyway, so I met this woman from Germany, now my wife, but anyway, so she decided, after going back and forth, she decided she was going to come here to be with me, if you can believe that. I still can't. Anyway, so she shipped her stuff out here, and then the last time she came, we just heard this long story. Immigration lawyer said, "Oh, you better not go back. our immigration system is so fucked up they might not let you come back in. Like, oh,
Wow.
okay. And by the way, if you're ever thinking about getting married, you should probably do that so that you can really stay here. And it was like, okay, so we were going to do that. So it's like, all right, let's get married. So we just did. We just went to the Beverly Hills courthouse. My sister called my sister, and she came down. And on an app on her iPhone, she became a minister of the Universal Life Church and married us.
Fantastic.
I mean, this is American. This is the American way to do
place.
things.
Yeah.
And anyway, then we went back to my house in Altadena, and so I just had my friends and family, and she was feeling kind of bad about not having any of her friends and family there.
For her own wedding.
For her own wedding, and she'd never been married, so it's okay. All right, I understand. Anyway, long story short, so we take a quiet moment in the back bedroom. Now, back up a little bit. She had shipped all her stuff out here. Some of it was lost or whatever, but she had this little transistor radio. She was raised by a single mom and her grandfather, and he's now dead. And they used to do stuff together, and he'd listen to this little Philips transistor radio to music when they did stuff. So she always had that as a connection to her grandfather. So, but when she shipped it, it was dead, and it hadn't played in years and
The
years.
radio had been dead for a long time.
A long time, many years. So I tried to get it going again, put new batteries, check the wires, and I did the old slap it on a hard surface.
And if that doesn't work, it's just dead.
I know.
Right.
Anyway, so I just threw it in a drawer underneath in a desk underneath the printer in the bedroom. Okay, so we go back to the bedroom and we hear music playing, and so I'm thinking, wow, maybe my iPhone is in there. No. A laptop? No. I don't have a stereo system in the house. Okay, it's not that. Maybe the neighbors? No. And then, it's sort of emanating beneath the fax machine. I'm thinking, well, these fax machines, they have a lot of stuff in them now. Maybe they got radios in there now. Anyway, so no. Anyway, pull the drawer open, and this radio is just on, playing, perfectly tuned to this station, playing, this beautiful love music stuff. So.
Oh.
Anyway, so it was like, wow, that's incredible. So we shared that with the people there and so on, and then it played the rest of the day and night, and then went dead the next day.
And it's never worked since.
Never worked since. Anyway, okay, so what do you make of this story? Okay, so I wrote about this in one of my Scientific
This is
American
fascinating
columns.
to me, yeah, because what do you make of this
What do
story
you make
as a
of this?
rationalist?
I wrote about this in Scientific American. I got more mail than I've ever gotten from one of my columns from this, because I just ended saying, you know what, I don't have an explanation. I don't really know. And even Deepak, he even wrote me and said, there's probably a perfectly natural explanation. A little piece of dust, the capacitor did this or whatever, but it's the timing and the love connection, whatever. Okay, maybe. And Jennifer's my wife. She's an atheist. She's like Dawkins Hitch, so on. And so what do you make of it? It's not that grandfather was on the other side using the radio to communicate, although there's a lot of people that really believe that.
I'm sure you got a lot of letters about that.
I did. Oh, yeah, totally. Oh, electronic voice phenomenon, EVP. It's a whole industry.
Is it really?
Oh, yeah. Yep. And they even have you can buy these radios and you dial them in between the stations where you get static, and then you listen for a pattern, which eventually you'll hear something.
You'll hear
little
patterns.
Fragments that come.
Sure, people make patterns.
Yeah, that's right. So I don't think it was that. But I don't have an explanation, and that's also okay.
Shouldn't it be? You could just
Yes.
kind of think, well, that was awesome.
So you can find meaning in anomalous coincidences, psychological experiences, that kind of thing. Something like a Jungian synchronicity, but without the paranormal goofy.
Without having to add in that
that's right.
paranormal piece that makes that happen.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and you tied it very nicely to a quote from Hume that I love. I don't know if you know it offhand, but it's about his standard for believing in a miracle, which is, and it's kind of a permutation, but a more artful one of Occam's razor, I suppose. But
right, that what's more likely, that the laws of nature were suspended, or that the person telling you what they think they saw is probably mistaken.
Right.
So it's like we know people are mistaken all the time.
Right.
We know the laws of nature don't get broken. Okay. So I think it's okay to just say, I don't know, it was just a beautiful thing that happened at that moment for us. End of story. But people wrote me. I got hundreds of letters and a lot of stories like that.
Right.
Oh, I had this. One of them was this necklace, and then my boyfriend gave it to my husband, and then we divorced, and got lost, and then I had a replica made, but it wasn't the same, and then I'm in Bali 25 years later in this jewelry store. There's there it
Right.
is. There's a lot of stuff like that. It's
Sure,
like,
yeah.
that is weird. Okay, so I mean, statistically, you think, okay, the law of large numbers is going to happen.
weird things are going to happen to you a few times in your life.
That's right. And you
Yeah.
remember the hits, you forget the misses. Okay, yes. I write about this, but still, it's interesting, and it's okay to just say, and so like with the whole book, I don't know if there's an afterlife or not.
Right.
And the null hypothesis in science is there isn't until we prove otherwise, and then we overturn the null hypothesis and say, okay, this may be true. But still, it's okay to just be curious about the unknown. There's a lot of stuff like that.
There sure is. Let me move it towards the more scientific approach to the afterlife, which is the life just continuing forever. Because you read about that, guys like Ray Kurzweil,
yes,
who believes in the convergence.
That's
where
right.
within the next, if he takes enough dietary supplements, he'll last
right.
long enough to the point where we are as much machine as we are man, and thus live forever.
So these are the transhumanists, singularitarians, the extropians. They're against entropy. Okay, good luck with that.
They're post-entropy.
Well, they're like the line I used, a quote from Woody Allen. You know, I don't want to live on through my work. I want to live on in my apartment. You know, in other words, the continuity of the physical body is what's necessary.
Sure.
And so now, first of all, it's a myth that people today live twice as long as people used to live centuries ago. This is not true. Plenty of people lived in their 80s, 90s, 100s centuries ago, just not very many of them compared to today.
Right.
So public health measures, vaccinations, modern medicine, and so on, has gotten more and more of us up to the upper ceiling, but the ceiling is still there, about 120, 125. No one's ever going to live beyond that. No matter what these guys do, the radical diets and exercise and calorie restrictions where you eat like, I don't know, 1,500 calories a day, and you're just walking around hungry all the time, if you can call that living. You know, and it's,
Michael, nanobots. What about nanobots?
Well, so this is scaling up. So this is the kind of the simple stuff where you
Right.
don't smoke, you know, you eat a balanced diet. So, and then you, know,
Kale.
you take the supplements, kale, yeah. So Ray Kurzweil, super interesting guy, very smart. He's
Yes,
the
he
head
is.
of engineering of all of Google. Okay, that's some power
Right.
behind you. Okay, and they have a whole company, Calico. You know, the hundreds of millions of dollars, but they want to get people to live 200 years or whatever. Okay, fine. I'm not against any of this. I'm just skeptical whether it'll work or not. I'm hoping they do something before I get there.
Right.
You know, so when they say, Shermer, don't you want to live to be 500 or 1,000 years old? And it's like, listen, just get me to 80
Right.
without cancer. Get me to 90 without Alzheimer's. Get me to 100 where I'm not on a morphine drip in a bed. Okay, just,
Right.
just one step at a time, you know. So I'm hoping they bump into some solutions along the way.
Sure. Repair your DNA so that it replicates accurately again.
Well, so one of the major changes that would have to be made at the cellular level is reconstituting the telomeres at the end of your chromosomes.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's this thing called the Hayflick number, which is the number of times your cells can divide and replicate. Okay. And for most cells, depending on the kind of cell, 50, 60 times and it's dead. And so the question is, why can't we just re-engineer it by fixing the telomeres? Now, there's some new books out about telomeres, you know, by some real legit scientists. And, you know, it turns out it's, you know, you should get 8 hours of sleep and eat a healthy diet and don't smoke. Okay.
Okay, which is what we're doing.
But that's still not going to get you beyond the ceiling. That's not going to do it. You'd have to really fix it. Well, there are cells that divide indefinitely. They're called cancer.
Oh.
So somehow we have to solve the problem without turning human bodies into blobs of cancerous tumors.
Right.
That's-
Although I know a couple people.
Yes,
I work in show business.
I know a guy. Yeah.
Okay, so those are two of our heavens. We've got the immortality. We've got the actual afterlife. Let's move on to Utopia, the heaven on earth. You have
Yeah.
some very interesting chapters on that. How likely? Well, they never work.
They never work, no.
For one, we're engineered, it seems. This was a very interesting part of one of the chapters. We're engineered to be pessimistic or depressive, right?
Yes, it's always there was always a time before when it was great, and now things are terrible. But if you elect me, we're going to make it great again.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
but I mean, just okay. The elephant in the room, there he is. But remember,
We did admirably well not even getting close
I
to that
know,
elephant
but
for a long
remember
time.
Obama's change.
Yes.
Change from what? From the previous administration where things were terrible. Okay, this is pretty common.
Mm-hmm.
And I always remind my conservative friends who have a longing to go back to the 1950s. You remember the top tax rate was 90%? Do you remember that? Oh, and remember what television was like? I mean, it was direct.
Yeah, it's awful.
I mean, the plots of the shows were terrible.
And they were watched on a
Yeah,
5-inch
crappy
screen.
little screen.
Yeah.
There's actually studies on this showing that the writing of today's television is much better than it was decades ago. I mean, this too has evolved. The vocabulary is better, the sentence structures, what the characters say, the plots are more intricate. Like Lost, you got 20 threads going on. This is not Mary Tyler Moore.
Right. Okay? and although I, like you, believe television is the most important thing that humanity has going for it, there are, as you point out, and as you quote Barack Obama pointing that out, there are so many other indicators that make this about the best time in human history.
Absolutely,
right?
totally. No question about it. There's no time you'd want to live before now. None.
And that's not just about TV.
It's not just for the dentistry alone.
Except in England.
Compared to centuries ago. Or just the food people ate in the Middle Ages or the early modern period. I mean, it's just this glop of gruel. I mean, there's just nothing of interest there. I mean, even the richest people in the world led lives that were just crappy compared to the lives the average person today has.
And there was so much more poverty, too.
Totally.
Poverty is still a problem, to be sure.
In 1820, it was like 90% of the world's population was impoverished, as defined by the UN, $2.50 a day or less, or $1.25 a day or less for extreme poverty. Adjusted for inflation, you could just, economists track this over centuries. And it was really only until about the 1990s, really that recent, that we got a hold of it, where it went below 50%. Now it's at about, I think it's 14%.
The world poverty rate.
World poverty. The Gates Foundation, along with the UN and its millennial goals, is predicting by 2030, maybe even by 2025, nobody will be below that level.
Below that threshold. Nobody.
Now, making $3 a day doesn't make you, prosperous for sure.
No.
But it's better than that. There's huge progress. But the problem is that our senses, by evolution, are geared toward noticing bad things.
It's a survival trait, right?
It's a survival trait.
Right.
There's many, many ways you can be taken out of the gene pool before you reproduce. So you really should focus on the things that could kill you, rather than the incremental progress that you can make to make your life just a little bit better. Of course, you can work on that, but you should be finely tuned to the bad things. So this is what...
When people tell you not to sweat the bad stuff, a reasonable reply would be, there's millions of years of evolution teaching me to focus on the bad stuff.
And this is why there's a lot of studies on this by psychologists that, for example, we notice bad news more than good news. The loss aversion, losses hurt twice as much as gains feel good. So to get somebody to take a gamble or make an investment, you have to show that the payoff will be more than double what the loss would feel to you in your pocketbook. Or just think about people's life careers. I mean, you have politicians, religious leaders, whoever. They have this 30 years of public service. They have one affair, or they have got caught embezzling, or whatever. Boom, it's over. Or the Me Too movement. Boom, you're wiped out. And so we really hone in on the one bad thing.
Preventing the bad thing.
And now, because social media people study this stuff, like the one bad tweet erases the 200 tweets you got that were nice. And as an author, I can tell you, the one review, it's like,
I know.
I got 20 good reviews. Yeah, but that one, I really want to meet this guy.
I wrote a novel once.
You know what it's like. Yeah.
One dude on Amazon.
So
I will find him.
So we're almost preternaturally geared toward pessimism, negativity, the things that could actually do you harm, because there are those things. Just I live in Santa Barbara now. Just look at the huge, beautiful homes in Montecito. Gone, just one fell swoop
downhill.
So and so that's why we have to kind of overcome that and follow the trend lines, not the headlines.
Right, and that ties a little bit into in those same chapters. One of the reasons why these utopian cults never seem to work, whether they're nation-sized or compound-sized.
Right.
They inevitably fall apart under their own weight.
You can't direct it from the top down by fiat. You can have rules, constitutions, and so forth, but it has to be super flexible just to allow people to do whatever they want. Because the answer to the question, what's the right society, is there is none. That's the wrong question. There's just it's an infinite variety of ways that people want to live. Of course, we have to have some commonalities, like we all drive on the right side of the road, those kinds of things. But within that, you can have a red car, pink car, blue car. You can do whatever you want there. And so all the utopian attempts, there's like, well, somebody think I know what the 12 rules are, and that's all we need. No, that's not going to work. And of course, the other problem is human nature. We're corruptible. whoever has power wants more power. You get these, sort of catch basins of power that naturally build up, and the people that are, sucked into it, maybe even if they're all started off with good intentions. I mean, Jim Jonestown.
Yeah.
This guy was a real pioneer in the San Francisco area for gay rights, blacks, women.
Well-liked.
Mainstream. You can see pictures of him online with Jerry Brown, our governor.
Yeah.
Hanging out together, and Jerry's there opening a soup kitchen or whatever, and and then just sort of slid downhill from there. But good intentions, boom, down you go.
Right. Sooner or later, you name a center after yourself. I kid, Deepak. I kid. Jeez, he's so sensitive. And then I want to move on to the final chapter or two, because you do, as I said, sneak spoiler alert, another heaven in there, which is the. You didn't call your book The Meaning of Life, but spoiler alert, again, we do get there eventually. You say some things I think are incredibly wise, and I don't know how a man of science could approach the wisdom of other people. But a couple things I want to bring up is, for one, Diana Nyad.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
so Diana Nyad is the long-distance swimmer, so she swam from Cuba to Florida. She tried and tried and tried in her 20s. And
I remember as a kid, I was rooting for her so hard. I remember seeing the diagrams of that boat that she was in with the cage, but the jellyfish tentacles got through.
Yep, so she's, anyway, I met Diana back in the 80s when I was a bike racer, and ABC Wide World of Sports covered the race I did called Race Across America. So I got to know her. She's in the back of the truck, and we're talking to each other in my riding along. Anyway, super nice, and then she kind of disappeared for a few decades. She was doing NPR and writing books or whatever, and I was out of touch with her. Then all of a sudden, she, back to do she turned 60 and decided, I'm going to go swim again.
Yeah.
And, she's getting passed by everybody, but she gets herself back up, does this. It took her 4 times to do it. So now she's 64, I think, when she finally did it, broke the record. And so she appeared on Oprah.
Right.
So and Oprah's asking her, maybe we should just, I forget the exact wording, but the way she put it was just so nice.
It was beautiful, and I didn't even realize that she was an out atheist, right?
Yes, she's an out atheist. Yeah, right. But Oprah had a show called the Super Soul Sunday instead of Super Bowl Sunday, and she would interview religious people, spiritual leaders, and that sort of thing. And Diana's talking to her about, basically staring into the abyss, which is what you're doing when you're a long-distance swimmer. There's just nothing to see, and she's asking her where you get the kind of the meaning, and do you believe in God or something like that? Did you?
I think it's right here. I think it's right there in that paragraph. If you want to find it.
Let's see. I don't understand. Yes. Okay, so she asks her if she believes in a higher power. No, I'm an atheist, Nyad explained. Oprah responded quizzically, but you're in awe. Puzzled herself, Nyad responded, I don't understand why anybody would find a contradiction in that. I can stand at the beach's edge with the most devout Christian, Jew, Buddhist, go on down the line, and weep with the beauty of this universe and be moved by all of its humanity. All the billions of people who have lived before us, who have loved and hurt and suffered. So to me, my definition of God is humanity and is the love of humanity. What Oprah said next inflamed atheists. Well, I don't call you an atheist then. I think if you believe in the awe and the wonder and the mystery, then that is what God is. And then I said, this is the soft bigotry of those who cannot conceive of how someone can be in awe without believing in supernatural sources of wonder. Anyway, so
it's wonderful, and it is the crux of what your book arrives at, is that you can be an atheist, you cannot form all these so-called spiritual connections and still be in awe and wonder. And to do that, you have a theory. I don't know if you must have written about it before, though I never came across it. Agenticity and patternicity.
Now that's in my book, The Believing Brain.
Okay.
That that we naturally find patterns, and we naturally infuse the patterns with agency. There's some invisible. An
invisible hand
Dan
that makes
calls it. I think he calls it the hyperactive agency detector. I wanted a shorter, punchier.
Who calls it that?
Dan.
Oh, Dan.
Yeah. But anyway, our brains are just naturally inclined to. We're sort of natural-born dualists, which is where we get the idea of an afterlife in the first place. You can't conceive of being dead.
Right.
When I say imagine being dead, you can't, because to imagine anything, you have to be alive.
Yeah, you're imagining from the perspective of a living person looking at a dead person.
You can't do it, right? So we're sort of and you don't perceive your brain operating, so it feels like there's something floating around. My thoughts are floating around up there somewhere.
Right.
And And I talk about Paul Bloom's research with children, young kids. These are preschoolers who are showing a little puppet show. There's a little mouse and an alligator, and the alligator munches the mouse. And he asks the little kid, "Where's the mouse?" "Oh, he's at this other place, and he misses his mommy, and he's hungry, and he's scared." Like the death of the body of the mouse for a very young child immediately it continues on.
So they just go to afterlife right away.
Right away.
Right.
So clearly this is part of our species, right? And anyway, so that idea of the soul continuing and so on is just part of who we are. Okay, so kind of wrap up at the end. Well, what do we make of all? What if there is no afterlife? So I just started thinking about it. Whether there's an afterlife or not, it doesn't really matter because we live in this life.
Yeah.
So I call this Alvy's error. Alvy Singer is Woody Allen's character in Annie Hall.
In Annie Hall, sure.
And that scene toward the beginning of the movie where he's a flashback when he's a young boy, and he won't do his homework. And his mother is furious with him, takes him to the psychiatrist, and Alvy, why won't you do your homework? He says, the universe is expanding. He says, the universe is expanding. He says, yes, the universe is expanding. The universe is all there is. And if it's expanding, it'll all blow up one day, and so nothing matters. And his mother says, what has that got to do with this? We live in Brooklyn. Brooklyn's not expanding. It's such a great line. And that's right. We don't live in the afterlife or 1 billion years from now or whatever.
Right.
I mean, these theists I debate on God and morality and all that. Like William Lane Craig has this whole thing of like, if the universe is going to die in a heat death 1 trillion years from now, what difference does anything we do make? We don't live 1 trillion years. We live now, here. So that's Alvy's error. It's sort of, I guess, what philosophers call a categorical error. You're in the wrong category here. And so I think that's, they try. So what does matter? Okay, well, so there's actually a lot of interesting research on this that people don't actually strive for happiness in the sense of like being plugged into the morphine drip and you're just leading this hedonic pleasure seeking, all I want to do is just drink and party all day. Well, there are some people that like to
There are some people who do that.
Yes,
but
they're using
in general, that's not what people find satisfying.
It doesn't get you there, no. So I cite some research by Roy Baumeister on happiness versus meaningfulness.
Okay.
So if you give people surveys, you just sort of ask them, what is it you do that makes you feel happy or purposeful and meaningful? And these turns out to be pretty different things. One of them is more short-term, the other's long-term. Either past, kind of looking back at my past or where I'm going to go in the future. That's more meaningful driven, purpose-driven.
Sure.
And or like going out for drinks with your friends. That's fun, short-term.
Short-term
brings you some happiness. Caretaking for a parent. This is not fun. I've done this twice. Right about that. I've done this for 2 of my 4 parents. I had step-parents. And this wasn't fun at all. I mean, It was physically exhausting, emotionally draining, every day. And, but I felt better about doing it. Okay?
Sure.
So this is, Roy's, the long-term things, that sort of duty-bound, there's certain things we should do, and that makes people feel better about their lives. So, and not in some payoff, in the next life. No, right now is, what.
Right, you don't have to be playing for the big reward.
That's right.
Because intrinsically the meaning that you assign stuff in this life should be enough.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it is. It turns out. I mean, the studies that show religious people are happier or whatever, they're healthier, you have to break those down. It's like religion is kind of a talismanic word, like it's this thing that, what does it really mean?
Right.
What are we talking about? Well, having friends, family, a social circle, having something to do, a reason to get up in the morning, go man the soup kitchens, help out, you're doing something.
Right.
With other people, and it turns out that's the key element. So having meaningful work, having meaningful relationships, being connected to your community, your society, those are the things. And that doesn't necessarily make you happy.
Right.
But it does something else.
It makes your existence meaningful.
Yeah.
I have been signaled that it is time for questions, but before we transition from this world into that one, let's take a moment and hear it from Michael Shermer.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
All right, so it's that time for questions. Just a reminder for those of you new to Live Talks LA, questions around here typically start with a W or an H, sometimes a D. They are generally short. We do not believe in 2-part questions, and only Adam Felber gets to ask follow-up questions. So who gets to go first?
What would you say to the author Jim Holt, who brings up in his book, why is there something rather than nothing?
Oh, yeah.
What do you answer to that?
I think it's the wrong question. Again, this may be one of those categorical errors. Why not just say, why would there be nothing when something is the natural state of things? Okay, so there's several problems with this. The word itself is problematic. No thing. It implies there's a thing that ceases to exist. But that isn't what we're talking about. There's just existence. So the lack of existence, you can't even really conceive of that. I mean, if I say, picture no universe, you get, okay, no people, no planets, no stars, no galaxies, no light. Okay, no, that's not enough. You got to keep going. No space or time.
No space.
Nothing.
No dimensions.
No dimensions. And at some point, you just go, whoa, where's that ayahuasca? Because that's what you're left with. So you just hit an epistemological wall. You can't get past it because we're limited by the words we use and the concepts we come up with in our brains, and you can't really conceive of that. So,
and what's the appeal of that question? I mean, obviously, if somebody's asking that question, they feel that something is being proved or communicated through why is there something rather than nothing.
Well, theists use it as an argument from
I
God,
see.
that there has to be something outside of the stuff that brought it into being. But of course, you can just ask, well, where is this being?
And it becomes a nesting doll anyway.
That's right, yeah. I mean, they end up defining it out of the question that this is a being who needs not be created. Well, why can't the universe be? It's just a word, God, universe. These are just words we use. Why can't the universe just be that which does not need to be created? Well, there was a Big Bang. Okay, yeah, but maybe that was just one of multiple bangs.
Sure.
And it just just regressed back.
They don't even call it the biggest bang.
That's right.
On the 605 freeway south, there's a big billboard that says evolution is wrong. From your readings, what causes people to be so involved with religion?
Oh boy. 605, it says what?
What does the sign say?
Evolution is...
It has a picture of evolution, from the apes up to man, and a big X across it.
Oh,
and
X. Okay, X. I didn't hear that. Yeah.
God did this, not
Yeah,
evolution.
so probably this is some Christian church that paid for the billboards, which are countered by the atheists that have their own billboards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of amused by the whole billboard thing. I really have no idea if it works to do anything either way.
If you can be converted with a billboard,
yeah,
you shouldn't. No team wants you.
That's right. Yeah. Well, what motivates people, obviously, whoever would do that is a true believer. They really think they have the truth. And when I was a Christian, of course I'm young, 17, 18, 19, through my early 20s. About 7 years, I was pretty confident that I was right. And in the evangelical world, it's not enough to say, well, it's true for me, or it's psychologically true, or it's metaphorically true, or no, it's actually really true. But then when you encounter people that believe different things that are, also claim to be true, how do you resolve those? That was, to me, the ultimate. Besides the problem of evil, that was the other problem epistemologically. And but there's there's ways around that, which is just be in a bubble with other fellow believers. So when I was at Pepperdine, I went to Pepperdine University for undergrad. Everybody there believes, so you're kind of protected, but not just protected from outside criticism, but there's sort of an internal coherency to the whole worldview. Everything happens for a reason, from the parking spot you got to the job, everything. And but then I went to Cal State Fullerton for my first round of graduate training. This is a secular school, and no one was religious, or maybe they were, but it never came up.
Sure.
And then it was like, you know what? None of that stuff really matters. This is what we're doing here, doing something different here. And no one even talks about religion. Then it was like, okay. And I sort of allowed myself to slip out of that.
Is that what happened? You just found that you didn't miss it?
Yes, I did. That's right. Yeah. It was just, there were several problems. The problem of evil was a big one for me. I took courses in anthropology, and then I went through my Joseph Campbell stage, and they're like, oh, all these interesting myths, so clearly, and these people believe, they believe, everybody, okay, so why would I be right? And
that's the big problem, isn't it?
But if you're in a bubble, if you're in the the Bible Belt or something, and every single person at work and home, which church do you go? Not do you go to church? Which Baptist church do you go?
Right.
The First Baptist or the Second Baptist? The one on this court is like, which Starbucks did you go to? This one or that? It's like that. And so the idea, like, I don't go to church because I don't even believe in God. Well, for some communities, that's a hard place. You and I, we live in L.A. This is no big deal. But for a lot of places, that is a big deal. So they have to, convince themselves and everybody that they're actually right.
And one way is a billboard.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Very interesting talk. Do you know of a book by Patricia Crone called Pre-Industrial Society? She was a sociologist at the Advanced Study Institute. She has a chapter in that book where she said, where did religion come from? And I don't remember how she got there, but she concludes that it pre-existed Cro-Magnon. That is, it was built into those creatures that evolved into Cro-Magnon. It's just one of the things that organisms like ourselves do.
Yeah.
So what do you think of that?
Yeah, so the problem again is what do we mean by the word religion? So like Paleolithic hunter-gatherers, or the hunter-gatherers we study today, they don't have religion like what we consider to be religion, but they do certain things ritualistically that serve purposes, social cohesion, enforcement of rules. They don't have constitutions and police and so on. So everybody needs to get the memo. These are the good things to do. These are the bad things to do.
Sure.
And there's an eye in the sky, or some spirit or force knows what you're doing. And in any case, we know what you're doing. So you better toe the line. These are all essentially behavior control, social control issues. And I think religion probably evolved sort of that social, moral conflict resolution, and then the supernatural element because of this agenticity thing we have.
Right.
And then
so those are two separate tracks that most religions tend to both, the social engineering aspect and the, for want of a better word, spirituality.
That's right. Yeah.
Questioning.
Yeah. Yep. So you always have to ask what benefit do people get from whatever it is you're studying. And in religion, clearly they get a lot of benefits. It's really not fear of death. They're not going to church because they want to hear the best argument, the ontological argument, or the cosmological argument.
Right.
That's not why they're going. It's to reinforce what they already believe. Their friends are all there. The music is great. Free parking. So it's babysitting. Okay, so it serves a bunch of different
and
purposes.
real things like comfort, community, a
right,
system of laws that you understand.
So religion is too big a phenomenon for any one thing. Human behavior is multi-causal. There's no one thing that explains almost anything. So, anyway, we know from archaeologists that that Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals buried their dead with grave goods and maybe flowers, maybe not. That's a disputed thing.
Right.
So, but of course the thoughts don't fossilize. We don't know when the first person who said like, "Oh my God, I just found out we're gonna die."
Right.
Oh no. And but we get to go somewhere else. Really, this is like Ricky Gervais and the Invention of Lying. Have you seen this movie? This is one of the great movies where his mom asks him, "What happens when I die?" Everybody gets a mansion. Oh, just makes this story up, and all of a sudden he's a guru. Okay. Something like that happened. Somebody realized this and then made up this story. But it's probably a long process.
My guess is that it has to do with just the very ability to ask questions, because once you're asking simple questions and answering them, sooner or later you get to the ones that you can't answer.
That's right. So, the fungibility of ideas. So, if I can say, A and B happen, then I can interchange it and go B to A before and after. And it's super simple for just basic, calculating your way around the world. But then, so Steve Pinker makes this point in how the mind works, that it scales up from there. We can build concepts on top of concepts, only just because we have bigger cortex.
Sure.
So probably chimps can't do this. Dolphins, they have a pretty big brain, but they don't have digits and so on. So anyway.
So if the first law of thermodynamics is correct, that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, and if, according to Albert Einstein, everything is energy, how is it that there is not permanent, eternal, infinite existence?
Well, the second law of thermodynamics is entropy, always increases. So the universe is all running down. In fact, in my book I say the second law of thermodynamics is the first law of life.
Right.
All living organisms push back against entropy. That's all, the whole, from a single cell that processes information or whatever you want to call the stuff that comes in and goes out, just basic chemistry. That's pushing back against the environment.
Dan Dennett used to call us life, in his prosaic fashion, localized neg entropy sinks.
Yes, that's right. I do remember Dan, right? I forgot it. That's a great line. I wish I would have
It
used
was,
that.
and I'll add the anecdote that he would like to pile on it. The only way to put an egg back together is to feed it to a chicken.
That's right. Very good. That's very good.
I know, it's a little gross. That's Dan, not me. But I'm sorry, go on.
But the second process of that, excuse me, is that, I think the other part you're getting at, your question is like, why can't we be like infants where the cells just divide like crazy? Like I have a little 20-month-old son now, and when he gets cut, you can practically watch it heal.
Yeah,
it's just
crazy.
incredible. When I get cut, it takes weeks. Okay, so why? Well, the answer has to do with not just entropy, but how natural selection works. So remember we start, ever since Dawkins, we really start from the gene.
Right.
If you're a gene, how would you get yourself into the future to continue, to replicate? Well, you got to build a body.
So you got to team up with other genes.
That's right. So bodies are really just ways of, are just vehicles to carry the genes. So, the genes are replicators and the bodies are these, replicator carriers. Anyway, so how much energy and resources do you put into a body to keep it going? Now, we live in a world because of entropy, there's limited amounts of resources and energy. So you have to allocate it. And so for me, say for a human to get its genes into the next generation, I got to live to at least, say, 30. But then I got to bring my offspring up to reproductive age, so maybe it's good if I go to 40. And it turns out I serve a useful purpose as a grandparent.
That's right.
So maybe I can get into 60, 70, 80. But after that, my grandkids are now adults and bringing up the next generation, my great-grandkids. I'm not really needed anymore. Now, so evolution would be better allocating the resources to the third generation rather than me.
Right, and also, and I think you make this point in your book, if we don't go away, then there's no evolution. There's no next generation. We don't. The species doesn't get better over time.
No. So basically, you have to die so others can live. The language I use to describe it sounds like there's somebody up there keeping track of all the energy, like there's the Federal Reserve of the universe,
right?
Is, keeping track, and the Secretary of Finance and Labor is up there. No, it's just an algorithm that natural selection runs unconsciously. There's nobody keeping track of anything. It's just how it works out. So the reason for senescence is basically all the systems just sort of fall apart at once. In humans, roughly in your sort of mid to late 80s, it just starts falling apart. And again, this is what the transhumanists want to fix. Okay, fine, but it's a huge engineering problem because you're going against billions of years of evolution that's just designed it to fall apart. Now, there's some debate amongst aging scientists about, is it an active system where you're sort of actively falling apart, or are you just sort of wearing out?
Right.
Okay,
because fighting entropy takes lots and lots of
Right.
energy. The energy doesn't go away. It can't be, like first law of thermodynamics, it can't be created or destroyed, but it doesn't have to stay right here.
That's right, yeah, it moves around, yeah.
Yeah.
So we have time for 2 more questions.
Do you have a story you would like to share with us about a pivotal moment of awakening which ushered you into pursuing the inquiries that you're now discussing?
Oh, you mean because I'm 63, I'm cramming for the final? Getting close, Shermer.
Is going to be on a test.
I better start thinking about this stuff, just in case.
There's only so many dietary supplements out there.
That's right, yeah. Well, not really in any personal dramatic sense that led me to this subject, just more of an extension of what I write about, which is, my first book, Why People Believe We're Things, Science and Pseudoscience, then Science and Religion, Science and God, Science and Morality, and so what's next? Science and the Afterlife, or the Immortality. So it was just sort of a natural extension of, and also really promoting the idea that science can give us, science and reason, science and philosophy, can give us enough. It's enough. You don't have to have a supernatural worldview. It's good enough what we have. And so I'm also arguing against a lot of my fellow scientists and philosophers. Oh, no, we don't do any of that. That's up to the religious people. No, why hand it over to them?
Yeah.
You don't need that. We can figure this out on our own.
And without adding in things that there's no evidence for.
That's right.
Right.
I was wondering that when we consider topics where people have difference of opinion. For example, Deepak Chopra, and we were talking about the billboard. Do you think that sometimes if we make merry of the facts, or we, like, it just puts people with opposing views on the defense, and it is counterproductive to having a conversation and coming to a convergence with people who are on the opposing view? Is there a better way that we discuss this that brings people with opposing views closer and more likely to converse?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts about that. I mean, I do a lot of debates. I like debates because I'm competitive, and it's fun to try to win. But that's not a productive way of getting closer to the truth. Really, you have to dialogue. And so that's what I've been trying to do with Deepak, but others too. It's hard to do that and sort of keep your cool. Inevitably, as I call it, or somebody called it, the reductio ad Hitlerum comes in, and 10 minutes into the, you're Hitler. Okay, all right, it's over.
All right, now you're Hitler.
Yeah, and that happens particularly in politics. But
oh yeah.
So this is why free speech is so important. Open dialogue. One of the reasons for the success of science is that it has built into it this sort of open peer review, open peer commentary. That it's not only okay, it's good, it's necessary that you sort of win over your colleagues who know the most about this subject by having really good arguments and evidence. And if you don't, you're just sort of tossed to the side or ignored or whatever. It's just the way it goes. It's kind of a competitive enterprise in that sense, but for a good reason, because most of what we think most of the time is wrong. And we know this from cognitive psychology. We're wrong about most things. And we're geared to just find the evidence for the things we want to be true, confirmation bias.
Sure.
And so to overcome that, you really need other people. It's really hard to do by yourself, which is why the fringe science people, as we call them, the cranks, they send us I get every week, some new theory of physics. Einstein was wrong, Newton was wrong, Stephen Hawking's, called Hawking's was wrong. But they've worked it all out, in their garage, and, they'll share the Nobel Prize with me if I'll just help them with the math. It's like, dude, I'm a social scientist, I'm not a mathematician, I don't even know what this stuff means. So, did you try the local high school physics teacher before you announce that you've made a Nobel Prize winning discovery? Just check to see if maybe somebody did this.
It is a group effort.
It's definitely, even if working in isolation. Yes, it can happen centuries ago, but now really you need teams of scientists, and not just that, just to keep you from going off the rails. That's the whole point of having people to talk to. Hey, I got this idea. Would you look at it and tell me if I'm completely lost my mind? Yep, Shermer, you lost your mind. Okay, I'll try again.
Yeah, try again. And that, because that happens sort of uniquely in science and not in some of the other theological veins, I think there is a certain feistiness on behalf of scientists where people who believe in science above everything else really do have to dial it down a notch or two to have meaningful dialogue with people like spiritual people.
That's right. So, I mean, the sense, like, for example, in the opening chapters, I write about the history of heaven. And it's interesting that it has a history, but it's not at all like the history of cosmology, where, you start with the ancient Greeks and, it sort of marches along, expanding universe discovered right here in LA, the Mount Wilson telescopes. And so there's this idea that we're getting ever closer to understanding what's actually out there. And that the models have gotten more sort of narrowly focused, and we've winnowed away all the crazy ideas that turn out not to be true. There's no sense of that in the history of heaven. It's just like, well, these people believe that, and these ones believe that, and there's no way to test them to see which one is right.
There's no evolution of heaven.
There's no evolution of heaven, other than, well, after Descartes, we moved to a more dualistic version of heaven. That's only because it just got inculcated from Western culture. The Hebrews believed this, the ancient Hebrews, until the Babylonian captivity. Then they inculcated the Babylonian cosmology into their worldview, and then they added this layer, and it just sort of goes on like this. There's nothing like, and then they found this thing in the earth, or they found this thing in space, and oh my God, it turned out that's real. There's nothing like that.
No monoliths.
No, no monoliths.
No monoliths show up.
That's right. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Ripple.